Increased cost of vehicles is probably in the 10 to 12% range. And who really is going to eat that price? Is it going to be completely passed along to the consumer? Is the dealer going to maybe share in that price a little bit? And we kind of expect the latter.
Welcome to The Fuel Line, where we explore all things automotive with a focus on mergers and acquisitions. Hi, my name's Fareed Ahmed. I'm the founder and the CEO of DSMA and your favorite podcast host. Each episode, we connect with influential figures that drive the automotive landscape. Let's shift into gear and get started. Today, we're excited and having join us a personal friend and also somebody that we refer all of our legal business to and the expert in this field, Mike Semanie. Mike, thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me, Fareed.
Mike, maybe we should start off for the audience to get to know who Mike Semanie is and what made you the resident expert in automotive M&A.
Yeah, so the law is the second career for me. I was working for a long time in corporate marketing for some powerboat and fishing boat manufacturers. At one point in time, the company moved from Florida to North Carolina, and I found that as an opportunity for me to go back to school, get my MBA, go to law school, and then started out on the legal career from that point. So it kind of started on the manufacturer side, but still in the vehicle industry, and then moved from that right into the automotive industry for the legal side.
So, Michael, just to get things started, maybe you could share with us something personal about yourself that maybe people don't know about who Michael Semanie is.
One thing that everyone seems to be surprised about, I'm not sure why, but everyone seems to be surprised that I started off college as a music major. I had a jazz guitar and opera scholarship, and started off in the first 2 years of my collegiate career was as a music major. I started to see some of my friends graduating with their music degree and moving back in with their parents, and that made me decide I need to change my major. So I went to economics and psychology, and then the rest was history.
So let's switch gears now and let's talk about industry overlook. And what do you think is going to happen? So first off, how was 2024 for your firm in related to the number of activities in the M&A world?
Yeah, 2024 was great. It was, a lot of activity in the M&A industry, particularly for automotive. We do a lot of automotive and also automotive software M&A work. And it's a very robust market for last year. One of the things that also sort of ended up being helpful for us was not only was it a robust M&A market, but also we have a lot of different practice areas. So, we also do, litigation, compliance, general counsel work for dealers. So what tends to happen is, there's ebbs and flows. And when there's any kind of a softening in one area, some of the other practice areas, for whatever reason, seem to have a stronger period during that time. So it was good for us. It was really good for both buyers and sellers, I think, in the market in 2024. Overall, certainly a good year in the M&A space for automotive.
Oh, fantastic, Michael. Thank you. So, Michael, what everybody wants to know from an automotive attorney, 2025. Lots of news out there about tariffs, about inventory levels. Tell me, if you looked into your crystal ball and you try to predict what 2025 is going to look like by the end of it, what would you see and what would you say?
We're very optimistic for the year. It started off really well. Blue sky values have come down a little bit from their peaks, sort of in line with, a little bit declining profits, marginally. And that's kind of as expected. Blue sky we always look at as sort of a proxy for discounted cash flow for the future. So that's sort of what we had expected. Some of the shifts in consumer demand and OEM strategies for what they're rolling out will certainly play into that as well. And then in the short term, there's some market volatility there, obviously, with some interest rate issues and inflation issues. And then obviously tariffs. So, we've seen where the buyers are looking overall for the same things, but from a short-term perspective, they want to look at a little bit more of a concentration on fixed ops, on used vehicles, how well the dealership does in those areas, because for the short term, to the extent tariffs go into place, that's going to be an important profit center for them.
Get a general sense from the U.S. automotive dealers that tariffs are going to be a good thing or a bad thing for the U.S. economy?
Yeah, I don't know about for the economy overall. I mean, for the industry itself, each OEM is taking a little bit of a different stance. You saw Honda make an announcement about what they're doing about domesticating certain manufacturing operations. It really does depend OEM to OEM. But, a big part of that is the increased cost of vehicles is, we're looking at probably in the 10 to 12% range is what's sort of anticipated. How that does with the overall economy and what that makes affordable for the average U.S. consumer, that remains to be seen, and who really is going to eat that price. Is it going to be completely passed along to the consumer? Is the dealer going to maybe share in that price a little bit? And we kind of expect the latter. That's sort of another thing that we're looking forward in the coming year, 2025 and onward, is some of the modeling for that. We have a lot of data analytics and AI that can help model for, here are some different situations that we have for it. We actually do a lot of that in the M&A space as well, just for buy sell deals for dealers. We can leverage some of this data analytics and AI to pull a bunch of, public and private deal documents so we can better understand what's market in different areas and different topics for deals and help to negotiate a better deal for the clients by using those data analytics. It's even helped us actually in-house to be able to offer, instead of just hourly fees for clients, but now to be able to do some phased flat fees, because now we can better anticipate what's going on in the market. So there's a lot of things coming in 2025, both in the dealership industry and in the M&A side of the dealership as well.
Well, it sounds like you're building quite a cutting edge organization there, Michael. Let's move on to the most common mistakes. Our audience are dealers, great car dealers, and they've all been at some point a seller, potentially, or a buyer. What are the most common mistakes do you find made by sellers when they're going through a transaction?
The biggest thing that I think a seller can do to help themselves is very early on develop a deal playbook. And I see a lot of dealers that don't do that, but I'll tell you, that really can help them to maximize their exit value. For a seller, most people think about deal playbooks as being for buyers, right? Here, we're looking at how we're going to value deals, how we're going to all these that come across our desks. But really for sellers, that's an important aspect of it, because then we start talking about, we're assembling the deal team, inside the dealership and out for our professionals as well. What is going to be our criteria for vetting buyers? What are some of the critical issues that we want to make sure are in an LOI? So when we first get started, we know what we're looking for right away and be able to say, we can send this back and say, if you guys can do this, then we can talk. Having this pre-sale readiness assessment for the store is a huge part of that playbook, right? We call it dressing the house. We want to make sure we clean up our financials, our tax issues, any vendor contracts that are particularly the ones that are over 30 days for cancellation. Let's look at our OEM relations. Has a manufacturer sent us anything saying that they want image upgrades or that we're sales effectiveness not compliant, those sorts of things, making sure that we don't have any outstanding consumer complaints that we can clean up. And then a big part of that as well, that I think often goes overlooked, is early on, if they can get their wealth management and tax team involved, that can really go a long ways as to anything that we need to do on the front end to structure the deal as well. That can very much help them for going forward. So those are some of the things in the playbook that I think would be beneficial for sellers. Other things that kind of come up along the way is, to the extent the seller maybe doesn't have the best inventory management, having a lot of water and used.
So that sounds really interesting, Michael. What a great perspective. But I suppose our audience may have two questions. Number one would be, how long does it take to prepare that game plan, or that playbook, as you call it? And would that be an expensive process to do?
That's the importance of finding counsel that is experienced specifically in automotive. We have a playbook set up with the parameters that we just go through with the dealer for what they're looking for in the deal. We can go through it with them very quickly. We can identify the areas that need attention very quickly. And so, no, it's a very quick process. It's usually done in a phone call. As far as fleshing it out and making sure that we're complying with these issues to make sure we maximize value, depending on what the issue is, it can be very simple. It's something that we want to make sure that is, the issues that are out there that tend to be the ones where either delays closing or it causes the buyer to say, hey, I want a price reduction for X, Y, or Z, whatever the issue is. Those we address right up front and get them taken care of and out of the way. And that's a very quick process. It's none of this is a lengthy process. It's very much identifying the issues and resolving them.
So conversely, let's talk about the biggest mistakes you've seen buyers make when they're going through a transaction? You've seen hundreds of deals, Michael, and being the resident expert, what are the most common mistakes buyers are making, and what would you advise them to do in order to streamline their acquisition?
Yeah, so it's a great question for you. It's that's an area where this is where the more traditional M&A playbook comes into play. So the buyers, we know what we want for a playbook for them. So making sure that they do that for going into it, so that they know that there's, how they're going to identify targets and select which targets are good for them for dealerships. What they want to do for in their due diligence, and what contingencies they want to have if they find something that's an issue, and then post-closing integration issues as well, to make sure that as some of the technology and software become more and more important in dealerships, your post-closing integration process becomes a little bit more complicated. And so making sure on the front end we have some of those in place and know what we're getting into is an important part of that. So in that process, though, one of the things I see buyers sometimes do is just sort of presume that OEM approval is going to happen, and so it's not really an issue, and not really think it through and think about what they can do to maximize their potential for an OEM approving them as a buyer. And also, it kind of along those lines, defending against ROFRs, right? How do we, if it's a manufacturer who we think, hey, maybe there's a chance of a ROFR there, it's in a jurisdiction that allows for ROFRs, how do we defend against that in the deal documents, and how do we strategize to make sure that we defend against that as well? And so some of those things that you can do up front, we actually have a book that's going to be published very soon on a 50-state guide for buyer approval and ROFRs. And so that kind of gives a lowdown of that area, but that's a significant one, because a lot of times, a buyer puts a lot of money and effort into a deal, only to have, either not be approved, or to have a manufacturer say, no, thanks, we'll take the deal and give it to somebody else that we want to give it to. So, to avoid that, I think is one thing you have to, on the front end, plan for and determine how best to position yourself to avoid those issues. Another one is just making sure that their advisors are getting involved early enough in the process. We get it to where we often get it where an LOI is already signed. Not the best time to get it, but we sometimes get it after an APA is signed, and that's really not the best time to get it. So making sure the advisors are available and providing those services on the front end is important for that.
I read with great interest recently, I think it was last week, where in automotive news, a manufacturer was taken to court by somebody that was looking to get approved for that franchise. And it looked like the manufacturer lost that case and had to pay a large sum of money. Do you think that's going to have much of an impact on future M&A transactions, Michael?
I would love to say yes, it will. My experience with manufacturers is that they're a little bit more stubborn than that sometimes. It is certainly great. It's great to be able to point to that in a situation where, and I'll give you an example. There are times where you're in a state that different jurisdictions require different things for a manufacturer to exercise a ROFR. Some of them say you just can't do it. Some of them say, well, you can do it, but you can only look at X, Y, or Z. And some are just kind of are wide open to a manufacturer exercising a ROFR. But we do sometimes see in those states where there's a limited set of criteria that the manufacturer can consider as part of what they have to do for exercising a ROFR, and they don't follow that properly. That can be a good scenario to be able to point to that particular case that you're referring to be able to say it's not going to work going that way, and really push back against the OEM in that case. So yeah, I do think it will help. The extent of the help, I'm a little skeptical about how far reaching that might be.
Michael, you have conducted business all across the United States. For our viewers, I think you being what I consider on the cutting edge of legal advice for car dealers in a very complicated situation with ROFRs and state laws. Are there any states where your firm would not be of value to our audience?
We have offices in Florida, New York, and New Jersey, and we practice regularly in those areas. But what happens a lot of times is because there aren't that many, relatively speaking, there aren't that many attorneys who specialize in automotive. So because of that, a lot of times we get involved in cases that are outside of the jurisdictions that we're licensed to practice in, because we can then, for litigation side, we can enter an appearance pro hoc vice. And sometimes a dealer will say, hey, look, I like my trial attorney on this, but I need some more horsepower on the automotive industry specific side and the automotive law side. So I can pro hoc vice into those cases and help dealers in those areas. And then on the M&A side, a lot of times we associate with local counsel for specific local matters like real estate matters and those sorts of things. But then we can handle the deal for them, in association with those counsel as well. Florida, New York, and New Jersey are certainly our main wheelhouse, but we do transactions and litigation all over the country.
So, Michael, I just got a question from one of our audience members, and they asked, what is it about Semanie Law? Why should somebody use your firm? And what are your uniqueness of your business? I think you've covered a lot of it on this show today. But how would you respond to that question, Michael?
Having represented and been friends with dealers for a very long time now, I've noticed that there is a common perception of I'm a very good businessman. I know how to what I want to do. I know how I want to do it, and I can sort of take care of it myself. I would say the one thing that I always point out to them is you are fantastic at running a dealership. You know the operations like the back of your hand. If something is a little bit off, you see it right away because you're doing that. You're running your store on a daily basis. You're not doing M&A deals on a daily basis, though. And that's what we do. So we see that when something is off, we know what parts to heavily negotiate. We know how the best to, move forward in a deal and make sure we get to the closing table, which is the most important part. That's an aspect that I think is not only important to find good legal counsel for who's experienced in that area and they can identify those issues, but particularly in the automotive space. Automotive M&A is a much, much different animal than most other industries. I mentioned to you before, we do software M&A as well. It is completely different process than what we do in automotive M&A. So having somebody that is a legal counsel, not only experienced in M&A work, but also it understands the industry is, to me, that's how you maximize your value on an exit. That's how you also, from a buyer standpoint, make sure you get what you think you're buying on a purchase.
It's a little bit of fun, Michael. What do you drive?
So right now I'm driving two cars. One is a Chevy Suburban. That's our big beast for the family, where we can pile everybody into that and then some. And then I also have what's now discontinued Infiniti Q60, and that's the one no family fits in it, but it's fun to just kind of to play around with.
Well, Michael, thank you. I won't take up more of your time, but it's people like you that help our audience make more informed, educated decisions. Your contact information will be on the end of this show. If anybody wishes to get some real straight talk and somebody that I can personally tell you, clients just absolutely appreciate everything Michael's firm does for them. And if you do need to speak to Michael, feel free to do so. Michael, again, my friend, thank you very much for your time. And I hope things are going well. And let's meet in a couple of months and see how 2025 is going.
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks so much, Fareed.
So that wraps up today's show. I hope you found it informative, useful. Please feel free to reach out to Michael Semanie. You won't regret it. So if you liked this show, please remember to subscribe, like, and share and forward this to other people in the automotive industry that you think could benefit from some really good legal advice. My name is Fareed Ahmed. Thank you very much for joining the Fuel Line.